Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Hodges, and I'm a community manager here at Systematic. And today I have the pleasure of sitting virtually down with Justin Norris. We're going to hear a little bit more about who he is, what his roles and responsibilities are, and how he has leveled up his career over the years. So we're going to kick it off with some introductions. So, Justin, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your current role and your responsibilities and what some of your top priorities are going into this year.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. It was good to be here and really nice to speak with you again. I am the Director of Marketing Operations at 360 Learning. We make a learning platform for companies. And I've been here, just under 2 months now, thereabouts. So still very, very new in my role, figuring lots of things out. But we have an OKR system here at 360 Learning. So one of the earliest things I did was really establish what those priorities are. There's kind of three main things that I'm focused on right now. The first is really building the marketing operations team. We've had MOPs in the past, but that person has left. So really, I was coming into to a kind of vacant role, and I'm right now the only person on my team. I have a bit of freelance support, but there's a lot of work to do. And one of the things I'm really fortunate with is that there was an organizational commitment to actually, build a team, which isn't always the case. So hiring, finding people, as you probably know, it is very challenging in the ops space to find people right now. So that has been a big priority. And very fortunately, I have one new person that signed and is starting in a few weeks. So that's something I'm super excited about. The second thing I'm really focused on is building out the marketing operations roadmap. So really have a culture of planning here at 360 Learning. And I was able to go through a really interesting process where, I could meet, we have about 35 people on the marketing team. So even though we're only about less than 350 people as a company, very high percentage of those, relatively speaking, is in marketing. And my team also supports our BDR team. So a lot of interesting conversations I was able to have and just learn, what's going on, what's working, what can be improved. And based on those discussions, I'm still working through that process, but building out, what does the future hold? What really needs to be done? So I'm not just kind of bringing my own preconceived ideas into the situation, but I can really identify, what's going to have the biggest impact on the business. But already, I know it's going to be things like, from a systems perspective, reinventing routing, Marketo needs some work, integrations is a big one, campaigns, attribution, all that fun stuff. And then the third thing is another area of responsibility at marketing operations here is our what we call our ABM program, but kind of an outbound motion rolls up to my team as well. So we're also kickstarting that. So it's been a busy few months, as you can imagine, but doing some cool things and having fun.
Awesome. Yeah. And congratulations are in order. You recently transitioned jobs. So congrats on that. And while I was doing a little bit of LinkedIn stalking on your profile, I saw that you are an advocate for all things RevOps. So I wanted to ask, what is it about the RevOps space that makes you so passionate?
I think RevOps is something that it feels very natural to me because when I first got into this space, I was at a startup, much smaller startup than my current company. I was the third employee that joined, and so I was naturally both marketing ops and sales ops because there's nobody else, and I saw the benefits of that in that you could have initiatives that crossed different systems without running into these firewalls or red tape or politics. It was very easy to think about, what is best for the business across these different teams without working in silos. And so that was very productive. So that shaped my thinking from the very beginning. And my role right now is implicitly, kind of a RevOps role as well, because my team supports our BDRs. We kind of go up to that, or our SDRs, BDRs, up to that first level of sales. And then we do have a sales ops and a Salesforce team that have other areas of responsibility. But none of this stuff exists in a vacuum. So RevOps is one way of helping to bridge those gaps. It's not the only way, even though I've only been here a short time already, I have a very good relationship with lots of the other cross collaborators. We've got an awesome Salesforce team. There's none of the issues that I've seen in some other companies, for which I'm very grateful. But I do think that having a kind of unified perspective on the funnel, the customer journey, and being able to prioritize initiatives accordingly that support all those go-to-market teams is something that's going to be very useful.
Got it. And then have you seen, since you've been in marketing ops for quite some time, have you seen any resistance to the transition over to RevOps, or has it been pretty easy to kind of get that buy-in?
I think, like many trends, it's way more popular in theory than it is in practice. I've been through a job search recently, and I was looking at both RevOps and marketing ops titles. It just so happened the job I took was a marketing ops role, but I was interviewing for RevOps jobs, and a lot of RevOps jobs are much more sales ops dominated. In some cases, it literally is just sales ops with a new name. And so that's problematic that people are just sort of capitalizing on that trend. In other cases, yes, it does have some oversight of both, but most of the RevOps roles or folks that I've seen, at least many of them, let's say, have come up from the sales ops side. So the risk there is that marketing ops kind of gets marginalized, and marketing by extension, its priorities kind of become marginalized. So I think there's some resistance and some pushback, probably more from the marketing side, from folks that are concerned about that. And I think it's a valid concern. I don't think it has to be that way, but you do need to make sure that it truly is like a cross-functional, interdisciplinary sort of team, that the needs of all the go-to-market teams are being adequately represented, and that it isn't just dominated by well, it reports into the head of sales, and so the sales concerns trump everything, and the strategy of the company becomes skewed as a result. I think ideally it's something that could report like into a COO or something like that, and then that can create almost like a neutral ground to help navigate any conflicts or prioritization issues that emerge from that.
I want to address your career path and kind of your experience. I know that you worked as a consultant for a number of startups and Fortune 500 companies. I'm interested to hear on how your time as a consultant helped prepare you for the role of director.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting journey because I started out in-house, and then went to consulting, kind of grew up through that, and I was there for 7 years, and now I'm back in-house. And consulting is fantastic. I think that it's a great thing to do, like a tour of duty as a consultant. It doesn't have to be for 7 years, but even just a few years if you're in the space, to master your craft, to get exposure, really broad exposure. Even if you work at 3 or 4 companies, and only stay 1 or 2 years at each one, there's no way you're going to get exposure to the range of scenarios and problems and challenges that you do in your consulting. And you also learn a lot about people, right? Like you start to almost see repetitions of different like personas. Everyone is unique, but you start to see like, all right, there's scenarios and dynamics, because human beings have a lot in common with each other. There's scenarios that play out again and again and again, and you start to perceive those patterns and learn how to navigate them. So that's a wonderful thing about being a consultant, and makes you very valuable. The flip side to that is that your scope can be a bit more limited, and there's times when it's really good to just be able to come in and just focus on one problem, and to be sort of at a distance from it, and able to be a bit more objective sometimes than folks that are inside the company. And sometimes you want to be able to own a problem over the long term, and to not be as boxed in your scope. And that's what caused me to make that change. And I was very careful about choosing the right company to go back into, because you also see that there's a lot of dysfunction out there. And so I kind of knew what I wanted and what I didn't want. And what I'm trying to do right now is sort of have the best of both worlds if I can. Is like leverage the experience, the knowledge from consulting, and some of the rigor that comes with being a consultant, and like the methodologies, and continue those, not lose those. But at the same time, I am really enjoying owning those business problems end to end, and having one set of problems to focus on, not switching context in terms of companies so often. So I'm fortunate. I don't think I would change a thing about what I've done so far professionally, and yeah, feel lucky to be where I am.
Great. And we have a number of consultants in the systematic community. And I've also been seeing kind of like a rise, especially with a lot of job changes going on in the pandemic, a lot of people going over to consulting or becoming kind of like an IC again. Do you have any bits of sage wisdom or advice to give to consultants who are looking to go back or maybe work in-house again?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. I think there is a bit of prejudice against consultants when you're applying for an in-house job. Um, on the one hand, I felt like, I had so much experience, and a lot of the jobs that I was applying for when I was searching would even have been, those people might come and hire my company to help them. So that, well, we're qualified to go and help them. Surely I'd be qualified to do that. And yet, although I certainly can't complain. Like I had lots of good conversations and things, but I did feel in some cases that getting to that initial conversation, like recruiters just had trouble parsing that experience and seeing how it was relevant, or they see consultant and something. I think it's at that level where you're getting screened out potentially. So that's something to be aware of. And I think consultants just need to make sure that they can articulate how their consulting experience is relevant for the in-house world. There's a perception sometimes that consultants are just like strategists or talkers or not doers or haven't been hands-on. And that was a completely erroneous assumption in my case. But they think when they hear consultant, they think like a management consultant, like a McKinsey or something, that someone is just coming in and telling you what to do and doesn't know how to execute. So you have to be careful about that, and learn how to, I guess, like with any job application, learn how to tell a story that takes what you've done and weaves it into a narrative that's going to be really relevant and compelling for that job. So it's certainly possible to go back and forth, and lots of people do, but that is something to be mindful of that I wasn't really expecting when I started searching.
Yeah, it's almost as if like you had all the skills and experience that you needed to fill the role, but it's also that piece of having to learn how to market yourself and really communicate to your
Yeah.
strengths and your weaknesses.
And I
Um,
think, just to add on to that, I think just sometimes recruiters, particularly if they're not super familiar with that discipline, they might be recruiting a marketing operations or revenue operations role, but they're not experts. They're looking for a blue widget, and they're looking for someone who's already a blue widget. So they're just looking at resumes to say, oh, you're a director of X, you can be a director of X. It's very linear and not so much thinking outside the box. So yeah, I kind of treated it almost like an ABM campaign, and I revised my resume. I saw what landed. I tracked my funnel, if you like, of conversations, and treating like that helps, because then you get a little bit more emotionally distanced in a good way, from that process. And it's like sales, right? You're not going to land every call you make. You're not going to land every job that you apply for. That's normal.
Yeah, as a former recruiter, I can attest to the fact that sometimes like people do look for like just keywords to pop out. So being able to really tell your story and speak to your experiences is so important, and going against that stigma of consultants versus kind of like in-house. So you've done a little bit of everything, in-house consulting, startups, larger companies.
Mm.
I'm interested to hear from kind of like your perspective. What type of accomplishments do you feel kind of like sets you apart in this industry? Is there certain projects or accomplishment that you are especially proud of?
Um, I think of myself as a bit of like an accumulator, and we all have our like professional superpowers. And the thing I feel I'm fairly good at is being able to like internalize knowledge from like a broad range of sources. So like when I got into the Marketo space and became really focused on like what is the best way of doing Marketo, I really absorbed all the folks out there that were sharing knowledge, and then through my own experiences, and really just try to synthesize that, and always moving towards like what is best, what is state of the art. And I think as a consultant in a field, that's your job, is to be able to define what that looks like for your clients. And the culmination of that process for me when I was at Percudo was um, what they call their score architecture, but it really started as like a best practice architecture project to say, let's define internally, what we feel is best practice across these kind of like major initiatives that we would always do, life cycle or scoring or templates for campaign operations. And that was like a multi-year project of defining what that looks like, building it out in a sandbox, building out documentation to enable the rest of the team, someone who maybe had never seen that before, to be able to just take that and run with it and deliver a consistent quality experience across different clients, across different people. So that was a huge thing, but I really felt we kind of reached a milestone in that project right before I left Percudo. And I really felt it helped me feel like, all right, I've taken a lot of the things that I've learned or feel are right, our best practice, and I've been able to like put those out in a format where other people can use them and where hopefully they'll live on. So that was one. And then another one I want to highlight, and I'm not doing this just because you work at Workato, but it was a Workato project because that was an area of consulting that we worked on with a company called Newzella. We actually spoke at Automate last year about it, but where we used Workato to really help them automate a very key business process where they had information from their product that was creating a completely dynamic newsletter. It was sent via Marketo, but the whole process was driven via Workato, and it had ways where they could have inputs from the team to run A/B tests and send samples, and really just totally overhauled and built a very scalable process for this thing that drove like a very significant portion of their daily traffic and users. And that was just a ton of fun. So that was the other one that came to mind for me.
I think besides being kind of like this living, breathing internal knowledge base, I would also like to point out that you're a 4-time Marketo champion. So that's another kind of like badge that you can wear.
Thanks.
And I want to get into a little bit more about your experience in MarTech. So you spent the last decade plus working in MarTech. I would love to hear like what do you see for the future of MarTech, and are there any trends that are going on that you feel especially excited about?
Yeah. So one of them is, in the beginning of MarTech, there was all this beginning, or, in its earlier days, let's say, there's all this excitement about proliferation and tools and all the things they can do for you. And, the Scott Brinker MarTech map, which is a great service. I'm not criticizing him, but, it's this map that just got bigger and bigger every year to the point of being almost unintelligible and not necessarily useful, because there's just thousands and thousands of companies. I think we're entering a phase of consolidation and a phase of greater minimalism, of a leaner stack. It's no longer going to be, chic to list like 50 tools in your stack, because you just know, unless you're a team of like 20 MOPS people, those tools are not all well implemented, well governed, well used. I mean, it's very easy to go out and spend $1 million a year on MarTech. Very, very easy. It was amazing how that budget number adds up, and not get good value for your money. So I'm not impressed when people list out a whole bunch of tools. I'm more impressed actually if they can get the job done with fewer tools, implemented well. They're like well treated, well loved, well taken care of. That is much more significant to me. So I think just that, I think we've matured a little bit enough so that we know that sometimes less is more. Doesn't mean that you won't always get a tool. I also think we're starting to know that technology isn't the answer to every problem. I think there's been a sort of an anti-technology backlash in some cases on LinkedIn and some of these spaces where people are saying, let's not forget what marketing is actually for, in the sense of getting out and bringing a message to market and educating people and generating interest in your product and what you do. That's something that technology can assist with, but technology shouldn't be, the defining piece of how that's done. I think that's true. And it's so, again, it's like kind of like a balancing and a recovery a little bit from maybe something that we've leaned into a little bit too much. But then the piece that really is about technology for me is taking those tools that we do have and making them talk to each other correctly. And again, I'm preaching to the choir on that one, but it is truly something that I care about a lot and that I think is super important. Um, all the data that's in silos, all the systems that can only work within their own little boxes, that's what makes things inefficient. That's what makes things still highly manual. So the future to me is actually truly being able to automate across those different systems and automate the supporting work that goes into it. So it's not enough that like you can send automatic emails for your webinar if you have to spend 30 hours of manual work to set up that webinar. You need to actually be able to automate the internal processes that surround all of that. And this is to me where platforms like Workato are so important. And was some of the work that I was starting to do at Percuto before I left. I'm not a Workato customer right now, at least not yet. But I'm a true believer in that power. And I think as companies scale, that's where cross system automation can have a huge impact.
Yeah, I really love your idea of kind of like this minimalist perspective on applications. Um, I know that there's like an image of like a MarTech stack, and it's just insane the amount of like apps that companies can accumulate over time, and definitely get into this kind of range of app bloat. So
Yeah,
I love that you're kind of taking the Marie Kondo less is more,
that's
take
right.
care of what you have approach to your apps.
That's perfectly said. Yep, that's right.
And then, yes, you mentioned speaking at Automate, you've also spoken at our systematic conference that we have, this Systems Magic, and have been a pretty integral part of systematic. So I wanted to ask you if you can kind of let us know, why is it important for people in MarTech or ops to get plugged into a community, and maybe where you've seen some benefits stem from that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think community is really big right now, and a part of that, goes back to that trend I mentioned about marketing, kind of a shift in marketing as well. But I think there's a growing recognition that people, if you want to learn something, we don't really go to a vendor's website that much anymore as a source of truth. We don't really Google it anymore. We're most likely, if I need to learn something and now I'm in a new job and I'm facing all sorts of questions that I wouldn't have had to face before, I go to a relevant Slack community that I'm part of, and I post that question. Or when I've needed to know stuff related to integrations, I've gone to Systematic and I've asked that question there. Because peer-to-peer learning is the most trusted source of information. We're going to get people, they're not trying to sell us something. They're doing what we're doing. They've solved that problem before, and they're just giving us honest to goodness, truthful answers. So that's incredibly powerful. I was very excited at 360 Learning when we launched our own community very shortly after I joined, for our audiences, learning and development professionals. But we launched that and we got over 1,000 members like within a few days. It was incredible. And it was amazing. I'm in that community. I don't participate that much because I'm not an L&D professional, but I'm there seeing people introduce themselves, seeing like the hunger for peer-to-peer learning. And that's what we're all about, is collaborative learning and like people learning from each other. It's kind of the position of our product. So yeah, I think it's super powerful. I don't think it's going away because it's it's way more effective than trying to like sift through information from sources that kind of have their own biased agenda a lot of the time.
Definitely. I think that's why it's so important for us at Systematic to remain vendor neutral,
Yeah.
and really take kind of like the pitches and the sales out of this community aspect, just because that peer-to-peer connection and learning is so important. Who better to go to for industry advice than the people who are doing these implementations and integrations every day?
Yep. Yeah. And I think I benefited a lot from community as well because I've participated, and just sharing advice. And I don't do it I don't do it with any other kind of motive, but I've known that when I was in consulting, there were folks that wanted to come and work with Procudo, because they saw, you know what, you've been really helpful. Looks like you know what you're talking about. Why not go work there? I've been able to get people interested in jobs now that I'm hiring more. You know, I think it's very important. Again, I don't post there just to hire, but if they say, well, there's a smart person, looks like not going to be that bad to work with, or to find jobs, you know, to go there and demonstrate. So I think for whatever you're doing, just showing up, delivering value, being a decent human being, it can really help.
Yeah. And I think community is such a great space to kind of practice your skills too for
Yeah.
presentations, conferences, being able to speak to both like the business and the technical side. You can always find different opportunities to kind of challenge yourself and put yourself out there. So, yeah, I would encourage anyone who's not plugged into a community to find one, put yourself out there, and get some new experience.
Totally.
And now that we are a little bit more familiar with your professional background, Justin, and some of your accomplishments, I would love to get to know a little bit about who you are and where your passions lie outside of the world of MarTech. I know earlier I said I spotted that guitar on your back
Yeah.
wall, so I know that you have a lot more going on than just paving the way and off.
Yeah, I try to sometimes. Yeah, so music is a thing. Been playing guitar for a little while, and that's a nice way for me to kind of get off of the computer and just connect with just a different part of yourself. Really love nature, spending time outside. It's been great, especially during the pandemic. You know, it provides a way just to get fresh air, just feel good about what's going on, and have that again space off the computer. So try to do that as much as I can. Also really into history, historical sites. So back when traveling was a bit easier, wife and I really like to do that. Travel around and visit different places, see the world. So yeah.
For history, you should start to join some trivia groups. I know that's something that I got into over the past few
That's
months.
interesting.
You're gonna have to, if you're ever in the area, join our team. We need a history buff to fill in that knowledge gap.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Um, and I love you mentioned like you love being outdoors and outside. I remember when I was recruiting everyone, when you asked them like, oh, what are your interests or hobbies? I think everyone said hiking. I would say hiking, and someone turned a question around on me and asked, oh, like, what's your favorite trail? Completely blanked. I don't think I had been hiking in years now, but I feel like now with the pandemic, we've all become a little bit more of like avid hikers and
It's
really
good.
appreciating the outdoors.
It's good. And you know, you don't need to drive somewhere to go for a hike. Like, well, depends where you live. Fortunate, I have a fair amount of green space where I live, and it's just even walking outside half an hour at lunch. It's, you know, it doesn't need to be like a big trip where you get all your gear
Mhm.
on and do this big thing, but just doing even less of it, but more often. Um, and that's a great way to, you know, take a walk at lunch and you more productive for the rest of the day, I find anyways.
Definitely get over that kind of like 2 p.m. slump that happens
That's
during the
right.
day.
That's right. Yeah.
um, and then for our last and kind of like fun question, we've kind of been asking everyone throughout the series. You've been automating so many things in your work life to help people save time, money, effort. If you could automate anything in your daily life, what would it be?
That's an easy one. It would be cleaning because I'm a bit of a neat freak, and I also really like the Star Trek series, at least some of them. And you know, I always really liked how on like the Enterprise, you know, the ship is like self-cleaning. Like they have all this futuristic technology that can take care of all of that for you. So that's a no-brainer. If you know you could have that technology to do that, life would be great.
Those are all my questions for today. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for letting us into your life a little bit, telling us about your professional experience, your advice, and your perspective on everything MarTech. I feel like I learned a little bit. I think I'm going to walk away from this with the mantra of less is more. I think that's a great bit of advice that you had to share. And also really excited and grateful to learn how you leveled up your career over the years. So if anyone wants to connect with Justin outside of this, go find him on LinkedIn, ask him all your Marketo questions, and connect on music and hiking. But other than that, Justin, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.